The iPhone 12s coming out in just a couple of months are going to be the first iPhones ever to rock 5G modems, and it doesn't matter at all. It's all a bunch of crap being pushed by Qualcomm that Apple really doesn't have much control over, and something we're likely going to hear about when they announcement so much, and they have to go into so much detail because this is the next generation, when in reality, to you, the end user, it's going to make so little of differences that you're probably barely even going to tell the difference. Let's begin. First off, we should mention that most of the time Intel was designing the modems for the previous generation iPhones, and Intel decided we're not very good at this, so we're gonna just give up and quit, which meant that Apple, who produces some of the most popular smartphones in the world, could only really turn to Qualcomm to develop their modems for them. Apple and Qualcomm have butted heads in the past, but they've decided to work together on this one because pretty much there's no other choice. I mean, Apple bought out the Intel modem business, so in time, Apple is hoping to start developing their own custom modems for the iPhone, but there was no way that Intel buyout was going to result in Apple's own custom modems being built this year. That's just way too fast. It's way too soon, so they're not ready for mass production. Earliest probably expect it in 2022, most likely. But because Apple only had one choice, they had to go with Qualcomm, who has, as we've seen in the Android market, pretty much been enforcing 5G on as many companies as possible. This is why you've seen Samsung get so dang expensive in more recent years, as well as OnePlus go to record high prices because everyone wants that little 5G check mark because carriers everywhere are pushing it like it's here, it's out, everybody get a 5G phone or else you'll be left in the dust. When in reality, there's kind of just two basic forms of 5G. There's the fast kind that only works when you're in direct line of sight of the cell tower. This is called millimeter wave 5G, and Verizon is the company pushing this so much. Wow, you can get over 1,000 megabits down as long as, there's not a bird in front of the cell tower, because literally if a leaf falls in the way, if it's cloudy even, if you go inside, if you're in a car or something like that, you won't get speeds, and even if you do, your battery's gonna get shot to heck as soon as you try to download something that quickly. And then there's the average kind of 5G that most of us are probably going to see over the next few years or are already seeing it. T-Mobile's pushing it a lot, saying that, we have the most expansive 5G network, but the truth is the speeds of that 5G network are about the same, if anything a little bit worse than what you can get with 4G. Not with T-Mobile, okay? They basically rebranded their high-end 4G towers as 5G towers because the 4G connection speeds you can get with Verizon are oftentimes faster than the 5G speeds you can get with T-Mobile. So I don't care really what technology is being used at the cell tower. I don't care if it's 5G or not. In my opinion, just if the speeds are basically the same as the previous generation, why are we calling it next generation? There might be some inner working or some new wiring being used by the carriers themselves, but that doesn't result in any differences for us. It's just kind of the same stuff we got with 4G. And if you're expecting that, well, over time, carriers will expand the coverage and they'll bring it to more markets, they never really even did that with 4G. So, I still get comments and I still get people on Twitter telling me all the time about how they don't even have adequate LTE coverage where they live, whether it's outside of the US or even in more rural parts of the United States. There's plenty of places where we can't even get adequate 4G, and now carriers aren't really expanding that market. They're just more distracted on how do we get 5G in more places so that we can get people to buy a new phone, or in Verizon's case, it's can we get people to sign up for our 5G plan, which costs extra. So it's basically a huge upsell because expanding and improving reliability of the 4G network, they don't get to charge extra for that. But if they can market some type of next generation cellular technology, even if performance-wise it's pretty much the same, unless it's millimeter wave, which covers, a few square meters of the country, and you have to be in direct line of sight. Again, if you go inside or if you go behind the building, it suddenly doesn't work. It's just a slightly better version of Wi-Fi at this point because of how shortwave that high-end 5G is, that it makes for great talk. In a keynote, you get to say, using cellular, you can go way over 1,000 megabits per second, but you'll never do that, especially now during the pandemic. I mean, there couldn't be a worse time to talk about how 5G matters, especially when everyone's stuck at home with Wi-Fi anyway, okay? So it'd be one thing if if they were pitching you, 5G home Wi-Fi. But again, even if more carriers started rolling out like, hey, you can use 5G internet in your home, you don't need an iPhone 12 for that. That does not require a 5G modem, because that's just converting a 5G signal into a Wi-Fi signal, which our iPhones can already do. So Qualcomm wants people switching over to 5G modems as much as possible, because that means they can upsell them on the updated Snapdragon chips, of course, which are way more expensive. That's how you get Samsung, who used to be the cheaper, better spec'd alternative to Apple, now making $1,000 plastic phones, and obviously having to make, somewhat okay phones in the $1,200, $1,400 department. They have good specs, but my God, compared to what Samsung used to make in their price points, used to be way, way lower. I remember when the Galaxy S10 lineup started at around $750. Now the S20 lineup is starting at $1,000 or more. A lot of this has to do with how Qualcomm wants to convince companies and convince consumers that everyone needs this 5G stuff. This 5G is necessary for you to succeed. In reality, there are tiny circumstances in which having 5G is actually going to make a difference for you in your daily smartphone life. What are most of you doing on cellular if you are using it? It's typically browsing social media, whether it's Twitter or Instagram. Some grandmas out there still using Facebook, or watching YouTube videos. Even 1080p, 60 FPS, HDR videos can be watched with adequate LTE coverage. There's literally nothing wrong with the technology used to create a 4G cellular signal that prevents you from doing the basic stuff you need on a phone. What 5G is all about is excess. 5G is all selling people on, you can download 3 or 4 seasons of a show within a few minutes, because we all need to download things offline, right? I guess because you're leaving the 5G tower, yeah, you're gonna need to download things. But yeah, most of us just stream content these days anyway. Most of us are watching YouTube videos, not necessarily downloading every single one. Or you could download a game in a few seconds, of course, if you're in line of sight of the tower. If you're using the average, T-Mobile 5G for the rest of the country, don't expect any of these great performance metrics. It'll pretty much just be a little bit better than what you're scrolling through Twitter with now. But you'll end up paying for it because it's a lot more expensive. That's why I have a whole lot of doubts about how cheap the iPhones are going to start at this year. I feel like it could be one of those years where Apple ends up charging a lot more than we were thinking, because these 5G modems Qualcomm are supplying are so expensive for everybody else. I don't know why they would make an exception for Apple. Maybe it's because Apple's buying them in such bulk that they can afford to buy modems at a cheaper price point. But in case you didn't know, the basic iPhone 12s will just be rocking the simple 5G, sub 6 gigahertz. That's the one that doesn't mean 1000 megabits down. That just means technically when you're using T-Mobile, you'll get that little check mark of, yes, it's 5G, even if cellular speeds are about the same as what they were with 4G. But the iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max will have millimeter wave 5G, and those will be able to do the, of course, insanely fast downloads if you're in line of sight of the tower. But this is not at all the same thing as switching from 3G to 4G. The data speeds that were possible and use cases that were made once 4G was made available were way more applicable. There was so much more stuff you can do compared to 5G, which just seems to be looking to run the Ookla speed test app, and that's about as much as it gets. When it comes to what most people use smartphones for, it doesn't make a huge difference, but they're still going to try to convince you it will, and that everybody needs to hop on this train, and I'm just here to tell you, don't fall into this crap. I mean, I'm buying an iPhone 12, but it has nothing to do with the 5G modem stuff. It's mainly just because I want the new iPhone, and I'm really hoping that Apple doesn't dwell so much on this on stage, because so many other phone companies have, and it just gets so tiring and so old when they talk about how much 5G is going to change everything, because frankly, carriers have made up uses of 5G that don't even really have any evidence of happening. I saw carriers talking about how 5G is going to allow for things like autonomous driving, and yet I've seen no company trying to make autonomous vehicles saying that, yes, this will be possible once we have 5G modems everywhere. No, the company that's closest to self-driving is Tesla, and they handle everything locally. They don't require an internet connection for you to drive autonomously, and most car companies are aware of that. You can't make a self-driving system that requires an internet connection, because there are so many instances where they would just stop working, or places you couldn't go because there's not adequate internet. And if your argument is, well, they're talking about in the future when every car on the road is connected and has internet, okay, you're gonna be on 6G and 7G by then, okay? So 5G is not exclusive here to the autonomous driving thing. Or they're talking about how this will allow doctors to do remote, surgery, robotics type things, acting like hospitals don't have Wi-Fi and wherever the doctor is working doesn't have Wi-Fi. No, they need 5G connectivity in order to perform these surgeries, unless they're like performing the surgery on their phone in the car or something. something, in which case, if they're inside the car, the speed still won't be that good. But carriers will essentially just say whatever they need to get you hyped up because they really have a hard time selling things in the first place. So don't expect the iPhone 12's 5G modems to make that big a difference. You're gonna use your phone pretty much the same way. There might be a slightly different icon up in the corner, but speed-wise, it's not gonna be as great as they think. YouTube videos might load slightly faster, but if you're in a place where 4G is not very fast, don't expect 5G to come to your area anytime soon. Sorry for all my ranting. I just really can't stand how often carriers push this stuff. If you have thoughts on 5G, feel free to hit me up over on Twitter, join my Discord. Let's chat more about it there. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.